Welcome to GrassRoot, Ohio, conversations with everyday people working on important issues here in Columbus and all around Ohio. I'm Carolyn Harding, and today I'm talking with Dawn Knickerbocker, Jheri Neri, and Guy Jones, all Indigenous leaders and organizers in Southwest Ohio. Dawn Knickerbocker belongs to the Anishinaabe people and is a citizen of the White Earth Nation. She is an enrolled member of the Minnesota Chippewa Tribe from the Ottertail Pillager Band of Indians. She is an environmentalist, activist, and is working on culturally based sustainable development issues and decolonization in her own community in Yellow Springs, Ohio. Dawn is a current board member of the Greater Cincinnati Native American Coalition, co-leader of Mothers Out Front of Ohio, co-founder of W.A.R.N, Ohio, Women of All Red Nations. She's the former elected chair of the Advisory Commission on Diversity for the state of Washington and is a published nonfiction writer, poet, and speaker. Dawn has a master's degree in human rights practice. Jheri Neri belongs to the indigi-feminist people. He works as the executive director with the Greater Cincinnati Native American Coalition. He is a published writer, artist, activist, and water protector. Jheri has worked with tribal leaders all over the nation and the world on issues from sovereignty, ceremony, sustainable development, and more. He was a part of Standing Rock from start to finish. And Guy Jones of the Hunkpapa Lakota, a citizen of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. He is the founder and current leader of the Miami Valley Council for Native Americans in Dayton, Ohio, and the Greater Cincinnati Native American Coalition. Guy has served as an advisor to the Cincinnati Museum of Natural History, the Minority Arts Task Force of the Ohio Arts Council, the Greater Dayton Race Relations Task Force, and the Bias Review Council of the Ohio Department of Education. Welcome to GrassRoot, Ohio. All three of you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Glad to be here.
Thanks. This week's federal court decision to shut the Dakota Access Pipeline down until a thorough environmental impact assessment is completed, which could take years, is a huge win for Standing Rock and for all water protectors. How are you feeling about this decision? Let's go one by one. How about you, Dawn?
Thank you so much, Carolyn. The feelings are, honestly, for me, a bit of a surprise. I think that as a water protector person, activist, environmentalist, what we saw happening was a call for the removal of man camps around pipelines. We saw the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women. We saw the issue of environmental racism. We saw the issue of lack of funding. We saw the issue of lack of sovereignty, and it's an overwhelming collection of issues that center around pipelines. And so when this decision came, and it was about a small piece after the Trump administration had signed an executive order saying that it was going through after such a massive defeat, it seemed like this came out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And so we want to celebrate and say yes, and at the same time pause and say, okay, but how is this really addressing all of these other issues? Is this honoring our treaties? Is this it's still sinking in, I think, for me. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, maybe. It's a win for the environment, but we're looking at the pathway that all of those big vehicles dug into the earth, disturbing sacred sites. That's not being addressed. What was addressed were the environmental impact issues, the oil spills and the potential leaks, all important because 7 million people rely on that particular water source. But what about all of the ancillary issues surrounding it? So that's how I'm feeling. That's my initial sense was yay, but also hold on. Let's look at this deeper.
How about you, Jheri? Thank you, Dawn. How about you, Jheri?
Well, I am cautiously optimistic. The Guy Jones was actually the person who got me involved with Standing Rock, being that he's from Standing Rock, and we continue to stand in solidarity with not only those water protectors that were there, but also with the continued leadership and elders and their position at Standing Rock. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I think our organization and those other Native people and Indigenous people and water protectors that I spoke to are all cautiously optimistic. And we're just waiting to see how we progress between now and November. I think that I think what will happen is it's going to take at least 13 months, if not longer, to do. And by that point, the election will happen and regime change will possibly go through. We already know that the new administration, if it's elected in, has a different view on the pipeline. So we're crossing our fingers.
How about you, Guy?
I was like, hell yeah. It's like, but like Jheri said, there's that optimism. And it's like, been doing this for a while. And after a while, you kind of get used to a number of things. One of the things is like, okay, so what's next? Mm-hmm. It's like, what's the reaction going to be? It's what's going to be the next challenge? And, so then, you prepare yourself for that. And, and it's like, and that's one of the things, you celebrate these, these victories and everything, but that the struggle continues, where there's a system in place in this country that, they're scared because of the changes that are coming. And I mean, and it's like, because it's just not Native people that are, asking for this change, but there's a change on a multitude of different levels. And in the sense that, so the system is now being challenged. And, and it's like, and so, they're stepping up their game. So, we in a sense that, we have to do the same.
I'm wondering how this court decision will impact the Ohio Native American communities that you're working with, and also those of your own nations and other Indigenous groups fighting in Brazil. I imagine it's encouraging a lot of people to see that there's some positive legal decisions, but it isn't final. So how do you feel legally how this might impact, first of all, your own community that you're working in Ohio, and then possibly the nations that you're from, that you're part of? Why don't we start with you, Jheri, this one?
Well, I think one of the things we're looking at in the state of Ohio is we're looking at continued legislation at the state level that's trying to push through the building of petrochemical plants on the Ohio River, trying to continue to push through legislation that limits the environmental impact, the environmental laws, and the laws that govern our waterways. And you have Orsenko, which has rolled back hundreds of environmental impact regulations that they were enforcing. And this is creating the scenario for these petrochemical plants to build on the Ohio and continue poisoning the water for 5 million people downstream from it. And now this time it's not just the reservation. Now this time it's the city of Cincinnati, it's the city of Newport, it's the city of Covington. And not only is it just the impact because of the petrochemicals, it's the impact because of the runoff. It's the impact because of the erosion, which is going to create a greater impact on the environment. In the Ohio River, you're going to have more algae blooms. So this is all of this. When we say we're water protectors, we're land protectors. The Ohio, it's named, and the state of Ohio is a native name. That's always been protected by those native and indigenous people that have been here from time immemorial. So that's a part of us, and that has a connection to those pipelines all the way back to South Dakota, all the way into Canada. All these pipelines and the efforts of the petrochemical plants to put oil through these pipelines comes all the way here to Ohio. You know, I think it gives us a sense of that maybe there is hope, because we have people in Arizona that are fighting in Oak Flats against the copper mining that they're trying to dig in on Apache land, you know, and you have bear ears, and there's so many other fights that are occurring right now. So we take a breath, we pause for a minute, and we acknowledge that, and we get right back into the trenches, because this is big, but it's not the end, you know.
No. How about you, Guy?
I mean, I can't elaborate any much more than what Jheri's already presented. You know, he just forgot to mention a few of the pipelines, but, you know, those are ongoing efforts. And I mean, you know, the current efforts that are going on in regards to the petrochemical, it's just the changes in the laws, you know, those are all battles that, you know, we're constantly, you know, lobbying against. I mean, you know, because there's changes that are happening. The current administration has really set everything back a lot.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, and then they've opened the floodgates, and I mean, you know, and it's a constant battle.
And you, how about you, Dawn? As far as the people you work with in Ohio, and also from your nation in Minnesota?
Yep. Yeah. So up on the White Earth Reservation, we have our own pipeline. There's almost a joke in Indian country that talks about everybody has their own pipeline. And some of them are literal pipelines, and some of them are other ways in which the earth is being scorched. A couple of things about here in Ohio. Some things that I am encouraged about regarding the ruling from the Dakota Access Pipeline is that the judge talked about the leaks. He talked in his ruling, talked about even a small amount of leak is too much leak. So I'm encouraged by that, especially because he also tied it into an economic issue of demand for oil products. So I'm wondering if this is going to set some precedent now that we don't have the high demand for oil, and a small leak is not worth it to the capitalists. So I'm hopeful, and I'm wondering how that will move us forward in the conversation about energy. So that's one part. But then the other part that we really need to address is the prophecies that Indigenous people have been talking about for a very long time. The prophecies of the seventh fire, the prophecy of the eagle and the condor, the prophecy of closing the circle, and all of these different things that we have been talking about since time immemorial about putting the earth back in the hands of Indigenous people. It's not, it shouldn't be beyond us to think about the fact that 80% of the world's biodiversity is in the hands of Indigenous people. And that's because there is a relationship there. That relationship should not be lost on us. And to think about our reciprocity in how we deal with the earth and how we are listening. So all of those things I'm thinking about when I think about Ohio and how we are honoring the good river that is here. Same thing I think about up in Minnesota at White Earth. How are we keeping our traditions alive, and how are we being responsible when we're harvesting our foods, and how we're protecting our waterways? So I know that Guy has some things to say about water protection too. I am just one individual person. I'm not an elder, and I'm not a leader in that way. So I'm just speaking from my own opinion, my own heart, and I don't speak on behalf of all other Indian women either.
Well, with that segue, Guy, what are some of your thoughts on water protectors?
Well, are you ready?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's first of all, let's go and talk about something here real quick.
Somewhat.
Let's talk about something here real quick, and let's address that issue of that's a term that I really struggle with, in a sense that there's a mental mindset that which we, all citizens, all people, everybody that's here, it's not just Native people, but we have to change this mental mindset, in a sense that, like even that term water protector, I've never considered myself that. And I really began to look at individuals and people who use that term water protector, because as citizens and as people, we have a responsibility, and that responsibility, even yourself, you know, that, you know, and it doesn't matter the complexion of your skin or, you know, any of that, you know, what culture and everything, is that we have a responsibility to take care of the gifts that were given to us. And that is the earth. And, you know, we take care of the earth takes care of us. And so, you know, and that's that mental mindset, that mindset with which we need to begin to address that mental mindset, so that we can begin to look at approaching these environmental issues, you know, from a sense of responsibility. And that's, you know, because, you know, we need to step up our game in that sense of responsibility. And so when, you know, when we look at these things, and, you know, it's, no matter what issue it is, whether, you know, if it is these pipelines, if it's about the water, if it's about the land, if it's about food, poverty, you know, we can just go on. We can begin to connect all of those dots. And that's one of the things is that this is just one aspect. This is one dot in that, you know, that spectrum. And, you know, so we need to go and, you know, we need to change that mentally. And you know, because those are the type of things. There's a particular mindset today, in a sense, that how even Standing Rock got started, you know, and it's like, and what that was a prayer movement, a movement of prayer. And that was through a vision that was given to the elders. You know, you had the youth there who basically suddenly said, okay, enough. You know, they begin to think about their future. They begin to think about their children, their grandchildren. And they went to the elders, and it was the elders who went into ceremony. And when they came out of ceremony, they spoke of prayer, of patience, of humility, and responsibility. And that's where that movement began. And, you know, and it's, yes, we had these issues that they were confronting, but they maintained that responsibility, in a sense that, you know, this we need to take care of these gifts that have been given to us. And so if we change that mindset, then it's like you'd be amazed at what can be accomplished. And this is one of those accomplishments. When this ruling came down, the elders were like, may the prayers continue. And then said, because they knew that, this is just one of many steps to take and return in that sense of us reestablishing our responsibility as caretakers of this earth.
Let me just put a station identification. It's Carolyn Harding with GrassRoot, Ohio. And I'm speaking with Dawn Knickerbocker, Jheri Neri, and Guy Jones, all Indigenous leaders in Southwest Ohio. And we've had this incredible ruling, not only in Standing Rock, but also in the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. That pretty much has shut down. And that was a strong coalition of Indigenous people and also African American people working in collaboration. And so I understand what you were saying, Guy, about it's not just water protector, it's the earth protector, it's the air, it's the food, it's taking care of what we have. Is that what you were saying?
Yes, exactly. And it's we have it's like even when I sit down and talk with members of various different faiths, and especially those of the Abrahamic faith, that that word dominion, what exactly does that mean? That means you're a caretaker. That doesn't give you authority or power, in a sense that when we begin to look at what's happening on a social level, in a sense that we're now dealing with a mindset of superiority. And it's like, you weren't given that superiority, you were given a responsibility. And look what you've done, in a sense that, it's like, what we are facing today, these so-called dilemmas, it's like, what is that? And that's because of your excessive greed and, and your lack of responsibility. We're now facing this. And, so whether, there was a man who died in the streets to wake up the world.
Yeah.
And that's what it took. And now we're looking at this in the sense that because people are now, looking at themselves and, and realizing that, that there's a lack of morals and, and that moral injustice that has taken place. And, and it's like, and you see that, and you can see that even in the ruling, when you listen to the words of the judge as he was explaining his decision, in the sense that you see that, you saw a ray of hope, and a ray of hope that, that there's the possibility of, a future for our children and our grandchildren. And, and that's, that was the point that I was like really enthusiastic about.
It's almost as, yeah, what were you going to say, Dawn? Dawn, you're on mute. Whoops. Still? Do you know how to? There you go.
Yeah, I agree, Guy. That was the most touching part for me, and understanding that we do need to integrate human rights with Indigenous rights and into a comprehensive social risk analysis is from the people who are looking to make money. They need to understand that human rights come first, and that we are not isolated, and these are not isolated incidents. And as we watch somebody die in the street because of the color of their skin, we know that many, many people have died surrounding what's happened around pipelines. that cannot be lost on us. We can't overlook the fact that there have been calls for justice for so long, so many people, so many voices. So many people are still jailed to this day because they stood up against these hazards, just trying to protect the rights of people. Red Fawn and so many still to this day.
I'm interested in the story of the black snake, and the connection, of the is that kind of like accepted as part of this oil fight, this pipeline fight? Is that part of it?
I think we should refer to Guy Jones for that.
Okay.
It's one of the things that I constantly remind people is that, you know, when we begin to look at prophecies and we begin to look at these things, it's like those perceptions and those interpretations of these prophecies, and you know, and with which we go and approach these, and you know, and it was like in that the story of the black snake was just one of many in regards to the prophecies. And if you're because along with that, and it's really vitally important to understand that, you know, these prophecies and these stories come out of a, you know, a relationship that we have, and that relationship that we have with each other in those stories, you know. And if you know the Lako, what we refer to as the Lako, which is a way of living, in a sense that, because in that there's a element of reality, and that element of reality, that you know, that snakes always travel in twos, and so this is just one, and so that which we need to begin to look at. So there's, and how do you change that, and what does that snake, you know, what did it represent? And you know, and then it's like, and that's one of the things is that if you talk to some of the older people, they will tell you that, you know, how that serpent came to be on the face of the earth, and it was because of man's arrogance. Serpents came to be part of the earth, part of creation. And how do we correct that arrogance? And, you know, and so, you know, you basically look at the values of, you know, this way of living, in the sense that, you know, and what are some of those values? Some of those values, you know, evolve around humility, compassion, truth, you know, and bravery. And those are the type of things that, you know, we need to bring back into these stories and have a deeper understanding. But the black snake was just one of those interpretations. And there's multitude of interpretations in regards to that particular story. Because, you know, some people will go, and I'm one of them that will tell you that if you listen to the story, they're talking about dragons. And, you know, and all of us, you know, it's within us.
One of the other things I wanted to bring up really quick, and because it hasn't been mentioned yet, and I don't want it to get lost before we run out of time, is that 21 hours ago, the Supreme Court ruled against the KXL pipeline, and it's not going to be reissuing the permits to go underneath the water. They upheld the Montana Federal Court and the Ninth Circuit Court decision. So the KXL pipeline has lost its permits, and they won't be reissued as well.
That's powerful. Yeah, we have probably about 3 or 4 more minutes. I would like you to give people, listeners, if they want to help or get involved or learn more, do you have like a website that you would recommend they check out? All of you? Dawn?
Well, it depends it depends on what they're, you know, what they're looking for. You know, one of the things that we try and I understand about the term water protector, and it's a common term for environmentalists who have been active in this, but the issue is trying to not use labels, because labels are a part of colonialism, and that's something that colonialism brought us, is everyone has to have a label, everyone has to have a title. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is because all of this is a part of a greater issue, and that's colonialism, and that is identifying those things. And so at gcnativeamericancoalition.com, which is our organization, we list resources for education and different things that are happening. And if you want to specifically look into the history of the Standing Rock resistance, of things that happened with that, I think the best thing to do is to Google it and go to so many different articles that were by Unicorn Riot and Myron Dewey and Indigenous Environmental Network. They did a wonderful job. They were there. They were able to record so much of what was happening, and I think they're going to be a part of that history as well.
I also suggest going to the Lakota Law Project. They have several different projects that they have been working on regarding Standing Rock, surrounding communities. There's many pipelines still affecting people, and I know from my reservation, honortheearth.org is another website to go to. The executive director is Winona LaDuke, and she has been a strong advocate for environmental protection. She tends to keep her website up to date, so you can find out what's happening there at White Earth. But I also agree with Jheri, and there's so many great resources. We'll try to keep them updated on our GCNAC website. But Unicorn Riot does a fantastic job. The Indigenous Environmental Network also does an incredible job.
Excellent. And you, Guy, is there a website that you would recommend?
Well, I mean, you know, it's all the sites that Jheri and Dawn recommended, but also too, you know, there's some other people that are really strong advocates, and you know, like the Sierra Club. Yeah. And I mean, you know, like even here locally in Ohio, you know, you can go to their site, and there's a number of community organizations and groups on the Ohio River, and you know, that are really struggling and opposing these here, you know, these you know, dealing with the petrochemical, dealing with what's going on the Ohio River. I mean, you know, they're shipping nuclear waste down the Ohio River on river barges. You know, if something happens, you know, think about the devastation. Oh. And I mean, you know, it's like, you know, what could happen to the Ohio River if there was an accident, you know, and, you know, in which, you know, none of us want to see that, but, you know, it's happening now. And, you know, and then there's people that are totally unaware of that. But, you know, so like the Sierra Club has a number of, you know, links and connections, and, you know, and I encourage people, especially if you want to get involved with what's happening here in Ohio, you know, that's a place to go.
Well, that's all the time I have. I could easily fill an hour with you. I honor that you are guardians of the sacred hope, and I thank you for being on my show.
Yeah, thanks for inviting.
All right. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Thank you.